Don't tell it to join, Dan.
Right, I think we're good. Right, welcome everyone. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining us for another session of Future Work Scotland. If this is your first time, very well welcome to you. If you've been with us before, welcome back. Delighted this evening to have Dan joining us. I'll do his introduction in a second. Usual sort of formalities. We do have a code of conduct. So most of you are familiar with it now. If you're not, do please check it out. In short, we just ask that you be respectful for one another and everybody have a really good evening and enjoy themselves. Usual format for questions. I think Dan will be happy to kind of take some pauses. So when he does, we'll take some questions. So just keep your questions coming in the chat and I will reel them back to our wonderful guest speaker this evening. And we'll do the usual community shout outs at the end. Well, over to the main event. Mr. Vacanti is with us this evening. He needs no introduction. For those of you who don't know Dan, he is a coach and trainer and consultant. He is one of the leaders, thought leaders in the Kanban community and is credited as having done the first ever Kanban implementation. There you go. He's also played a big part in the sort of PSK course with the Scrum.org, which I was lucky enough to do under his instruction earlier this year. That was excellent, watching him joining us at 4 AM from Florida. And he's also the author of a couple of books, many of which you've probably seen, including When Will It Be Done, which is what brings us all together this evening. And I'm sure Dan has the answers. The floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you very much for that, Seth. That was, I'm not sure if I can follow that introduction, maybe, but we'll give it a shot. I was just so everybody knows, I was telling Babs before everybody else joined the call. If you're wondering about the artwork behind me, I am in a hotel room. We were talking about the exotic places in the world that everybody is right now. Believe it or not, I'm in that tourist mecca called Omaha, Nebraska. Yes, Nebraska. I really honestly can't get into anything much more than that. It's a witness protection thing, so they don't like me saying too much. But that's where I am right now. So I apologize for that view. Hopefully we can ignore that for most of the evening. So thank you everybody for joining. We have a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff that we want to get through for this evening. As Seth said, we're going to keep this as informal as possible. I would much rather talk about the things that you want to talk about and answer the questions that you have. I do have a whole bunch of scripted stuff I want to get through, but from my perspective, the next 45 minutes to an hour is yours. So please feel free to, as Seth said, chat away any questions that you may have, and I'll pause as much as I can to take those questions. And I am going to be asking for some studio audience volunteers here in just a second as well. So without any further ado, let us get started. So let me see if I can share my screen. We probably should check this out before I could share my screen. Share screen. There. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
I think we're going to assume that this is the right talk that I'm supposed to be doing. So let's talk about how to answer when will it be done. But in order to do that, of course, I always start this particular presentation. I always start off by making you a deal, or actually more correctly, playing a game called Let's Make a Deal. So maybe you've heard of this before. I don't know if they have the equivalent of this in the UK or not, but there's a game show in America called Let's Make a Deal, and it was created by this. It's actually it's the worst kept secret in all of American game shows that the best game shows in America were actually created by Canadians. And Let's Make a Deal was created by this Canadian, Monty. He looks Canadian, doesn't he? If you look at him, he kind of looks like a Canadian from Winnipeg, I believe. But of course, we know all the best Canadians are Scottish, of course, too, right? We know this, but I don't think Monty Hall is Scottish. Anyway, Monty Hall created the show Let's Make a Deal, and a typical picture of a Let's Make a Deal audience is something like this. It's been recreated a couple times in America. This is the latest version of it. But if you ever are in America and you tune in, you will see a studio filled of people that look like this. And the reason they look like this is because the way it works is Monty Hall or whoever the host is will walk around the audience and randomly pick people to play certain games. And so what they do is they dress up in these crazy costumes because they want to catch Monty Hall's eye, and because they want to be the ones selected to play these games. One game in particular that Monty Hall likes to play is when he selects somebody at random from the audience, what he will do is he will direct that audience member's attention to, on the stage, there will be three closed doors. And let's actually show that here for a second, because we're going to play this. So on the stage will be something like this, and there. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now too. Yeah. So on the stage will be three closed doors, 1, 2, and 3. And Monty Hall will direct the contestants' attention to those three closed doors. And the objective of this game is very, very simple. Behind one of those closed doors is a brand new car. Behind each of the other two closed doors is a goat. And if you choose the door that has the new car, then of course you win the new car. I'm assuming, I always get asked this question, I'm assuming if you choose the door with the goat that you get to go home with the goat, but I don't like to ask those questions in polite company. So, but the idea is that you want to win the brand new car. So let's do this. And I recognize that many of you have probably seen this particular example. So what I'd like to do, if at all possible, if we can take a volunteer from this call who has never seen Let's Make a Deal, who doesn't know anything about this example whatsoever, if I could take, if somebody could just kindly, volunteer to participate and play this game with me. Is that possible to do? Can we take somebody to do that, please?
Yeah. Happy. Anybody, any volunteers? Anybody game, so to speak?
Please. But again, please, somebody who's never seen this before. Like I said, I know a lot of you have seen this, so please don't ruin it for anybody else if you have seen it.
Just need one, guys.
Anyone?
Fun, anyone?
Or has everybody seen it?
Don't be shy.
I'll do it.
Chris has volunteered. Well done, that man.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Thank you. All right, Chris. So I'm Monty Hall. You're Chris. On the stage, as you can see, there are three closed doors. Which one of these closed doors, 1, 2, or 3, has the brand new car behind it?
Number 1.
Number 1 has a brand new car. Okay, great. So Chris has chosen door number 1. What I'm going to do here in just a second, and of course the most dangerous words in the English language are watch this, right? But what I'm going to do is you'll see that I'm going to select door number 1 because Chris has selected door number 1. When I do select door number 1, either door number 2 or door number 3, one of the two doors that he hasn't selected, either door 2 or door 3, will open to reveal where one of the goats are, right? Okay, so let's do this. Let's hope this works. I click on door number 1, and there you can see we reveal door number 2, and now there's a goat. Okay, so now, Chris, here's the Let's Make a Deal part of Let's Make a Deal. Given the fact that you just chose door number 1, and given the fact that I just showed you where one of the goats is, I'm going to give you this one-time only chance to change your answer if you want to. Right? So you can either stick with door number 1, your original guess, or you have this one-time opportunity to switch to door number 3. What would you like to do?
Like to stick.
You'd like to stick. Perfect. That's great. That's a great answer. Why, if I may, if you don't mind sharing, why do you think that you would like to stick with door number
1? The number 1 is the position I play in rugby. So.
Oh, so science. You're bringing science into this. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Any reason why?
No.
Do you think 3? And so you think 3 is an unlucky number or something like that? No.
No. I feel quite confident in number 1.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Maybe let me ask you it a little bit different way. When all 3 doors were closed, what was your chance of being right for the new car?
1 in 3.
1 in 3. Okay, great. Now that we've opened up this door number 2, what are your chances now?
It's a 50-50.
50-50. Yeah. So kind of in your mind, because there's a 50-50 chance right now, and I've already picked door number 1, and I liked door number 1. That was the position you played, you said, or the
Yes.
number? Yeah. All right. That's why we're going to go with door number 1. Okay, great. Thank you for volunteering, Chris. We're going to come back to you a little bit later in the show. Obviously, I can't reveal the answer right now because if I do, all of you guys would, can I say piss off? Can I say, is that okay? Can I say that? Yeah. All of you guys would just leave and not stay for the rest of the presentation. So to keep your attention, I will come back to this. Chris, please stick around because I'll be coming back to you shortly to talk about why. But the reason that I like to start off with something like this is for two reasons. Well, there's two reasons. Yeah, there's two reasons I like to start off with this. Number one, what I essentially asked Chris to do, whether he knew it or not, what I essentially asked him to do was to make a prediction, right? I was asking him to, kind of tell me, forecast, where is that brand new car? And you could see as we talked through our options, because there are 3 closed doors and because we're talking about predicting, because we're talking about kind of forecasting the future, our discussion had to have a probabilistic element to it. Once there's uncertainty involved, then we have to start to take a probabilistic approach to the world. And that's really what this point of this game is kind of reinforcing. And what I'd like to talk about, what I'd like to spend actually the rest of the night talking about is, why do forecasts require more of a probabilistic element? And how do we make that happen for our stuff? So let me go back to the presentation if I can. Just out of curiosity, while I'm switching, let's do this. Let's do this because this could be fun for later. Because my hope is most of you were playing at home. All of our viewing audience at home was playing along. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and when I say 3, I want everybody to type in the chat whether you would switch or whether you would not switch. Can we do that? Right. So everybody think about, if you're playing the game, would you switch or would you not switch? And on the count of 3, I want everybody to type in whether you would switch or not switch. Everybody got that? Everybody ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3, go. Wow, that was awesome. Not switch, not switch. Okay. I'm seeing everything fly by, which is wonderful. I'm roughly, in a very non-scientific way, I'm seeing roughly 50-50 between switch and not switch, which is wonderful. That's exactly the result I was going. So we've all now, by the way, we've all got it in writing now. When we come back and see who was right and who was, I almost said something really, really rude there, but I got to be careful. I got to be really careful. I'm not even drinking. We'll see. Okay. When we left off last time, unfortunately, we didn't leave off last time because this is the first time the staff has ever invited me to be part of your talk. By the way, I don't think I'm sharing yet. Am I? I don't think I am.
Yep.
There. Can everybody see? Yep. When we left off last time, like I said, there was no last time. So I'm just gonna put this out there, and maybe you guys can answer it. What does a 19th century Yorkshire cotton industrialist have to do with the Manhattan Project? I'm not gonna, this is kind of a rhetorical question right now, but there is the Google out there, and by all means, people go and do some research because we will come back to this a little bit later as well, but I want an answer to, what does a 19th century Yorkshire cotton industrialist have to do, or sorry, I'm American, Yorkshire cotton industrialist have to do with the Manhattan Project? We'll come back to this. It's a bit cliche, getting back to this whole forecasting. It's a bit cliched, but everybody knows, right? The most common forecast that everybody's used to is weather forecasting. Unless you're in Scotland, because it's like rain. Is it rain sideways? Is it rain up and down? Is it rain whatever? But most of the regular world realizes that, or has to do with weather forecasting. And in particular, I want to talk about a very specific form of weather forecasting, and that is hurricane forecasting. Even though I'm in Nebraska right now, I actually live in South Florida, and I moved there 4 years ago or so. And as you can imagine, when I moved to Florida, I became very, 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 very interested, in these big storms called hurricanes. And so, as everybody probably knows, this area, so this is, a map of the Atlantic. This area of the Atlantic is very, very, very prone, or very, very infamous for its storm activity. And between, say, June to October-ish, November-ish, whatever it is, storms that develop in this part of the Atlantic tend to drift to the west and to the north. And as they drift to the west and to the north, they turn into these bigger and bigger and bigger storms called hurricanes. And as you can imagine, that puts the United States in the direct path of a lot of these storms. So the US has a very, very, very vested interest in understanding when these storms form, you know, which way are they tracking, and and more importantly, are they going to hit the US? Because obviously we don't care about anybody else. Just for reference, this is where Dan lives. That's as you can see, right in Hurricane Alley. That's where Dan is. My first year in Florida, this is my first experience with a hurricane. This is a hurricane that actually brushed up the coast of Florida, about 100 miles off the coast, which kind of tells you how massive these storms are, because you can get tropical force, you know, hurricane force winds, you know, that extend, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of miles. And so we had knocked down trees and fences and things like that. You can imagine something like this got my attention very, 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 very quickly. So I don't want to talk about this particular storm, but I do want to talk about another storm that formed back on October 22nd, 2012. This particular storm formed in the Southern Caribbean, and you may or may not know, maybe you have seen these before, but we have a government agency called the National Hurricane Center that is responsible for doing hurricane forecasts. And whenever one of these storms form, they put out these types of graphics. Like I said, maybe you've seen these, maybe you've not. We're gonna talk these graphics to death. But as you can see, this storm, when it formed on Monday, October 22nd, it was so early in its formation that it didn't even have a name. All of you know that we name our storms. And so this one was so early in its formation, didn't even have a name. It was just called Tropical Depression 18. Okay, National Hurricane Center puts this graphic out. And that particular storm grew to become the largest hurricane ever seen in the Atlantic, as measured by diameter. We're just going to measure, you know, just pure size. That particular storm became the largest ever recorded. I shouldn't say ever seen, but ever recorded. Does anybody happen to know its name? If you had a guess, I don't know if we want to put this in the chat or if somebody wants to shout out answers, but what do you guys think the name of this hurricane was? Katrina, anybody have a Sharpie? Yeah, funny. Okay, yes. Bigly, yeah. Kerfev, yeah, we all get those. It's not Hurricane Daniel. Nice guess though, Scott. Andrew, it was not D. It wasn't. It doesn't begin with a D. It doesn't begin with an F either, by the way. Who's Liz? Liz is the brilliant participant in the finally, and of course it's a woman, right? Notice none of the men got anything right, right? Hurricane Sandy. This was Hurricane Sandy. It was known as actually Superstorm Sandy. Maybe you've known it because it was so big. They didn't even have a name for it because it was so big. They called it Superstorm Sandy. So a couple things to know about Hurricane Sandy. I just mentioned that it was the largest hurricane ever. It was the second costliest in U.S. history. I think the costliest being Katrina, which is I think why a lot of people guess Katrina. But Katrina was a relatively small storm, just very, very costly, unfortunately. And Sandy was so big it affected 24 states, and of course we can't forget our friends to the north of the border, parts of Canada, with Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York suffering the most damage. 24 states is just incredible. I can't even tell you what a big deal 24 states is. Normally, when hurricanes hit, it affects 3, maybe 4 states. Sandy hit 24. That's almost half of the U.S. got hit by Sandy. The question is, would you have guessed any of that just by looking at this picture? Obviously, that's rhetorical too, because the answer is no. So let's talk about. We're going to talk about that soon. But before we talk about it a little bit more, there's one other thing about Sandy. That's maybe the most important thing about Sandy for this particular talk. There was surprisingly little loss of life. Now, obviously, any loss of life is tragic. I don't want to say that people losing their lives is not tragic. Any loss of life is tragic, of course. But given those statistics that I just put up, largest hurricane ever, hit 24 states, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I think you would have expected a very, very large casualty list. And there just really wasn't. There wasn't, which means that the National Hurricane Center knows something that we don't. They were good enough, or maybe even better than good enough at their forecasting, to allow for the United States to be properly prepared, such that there was not so many casualties. So let's talk about exactly what's going on in this picture. And specifically, I want to talk about the cone. My hope is when you see this picture, your eye is immediately drawn to that white kind of cone shaded area. I put this up. My guess is nobody saw it, but there is some text at the top of this graphic. And my guess is if you've seen these before, if you've seen these pictures before, you've probably never ever read this text. So I'm going to blow it up for you so we have a chance to see what that text in that black box actually says. And it says, note, the cone contains the probable path of the storm's center, but does not show the size of the storm. Hazardous conditions can occur outside of the cone. So most people, when they see this picture, they think it's a picture of, the kind of the destructive path where the storm is going to affect and what areas are going to be affected by that. That's exactly not what this cone is saying. That cone, this cone is saying the probable path of the storm center. So, we can have, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse moving on my screen or not, but the center can go anywhere from the left edge to the right edge. And of course, because these storms are huge, you can have hurricane conditions well outside of this cone. All the National Hurricane Center doing is predicting the center. Now, the reason that's important is because it says the probable path of the storm. That's my emphasis, by the way. I'm the one who emphasized that probable. Maybe in the chat window or something like that, if you could guess, I mean, what do you think the National Hurricane Center means when they say probable? What do they mean in terms of a number, right? Are we talking 20%, 40%, 50%, 90%, 99%? I mean, what does everybody think? In terms of what they mean by probable, the probable path of the storm. 75%, more than 50, 85, 60, 70. You guys are pretty forgiving, I have to say. And maybe it's because you don't live in Hurricane Alley. Maybe that's why. But when I was I'm sitting there, just outside of Miami. I'm like, probable better be pretty damn certain. It's like I was looking for 90, 95% myself. And it turns out, because maybe a lot of you have cheated. Maybe you've seen this presentation before. 11T really, it's actually, what they're saying is it's actually a 60 to 70% chance. So that's what they mean by probable. 60 to 70% chance of the storm. Like I said, I was fairly disappointed with this number. Because it's like, why can't they do better? And to be a bit facetious, why can't they do 100%? Why is 60 to 70% the best they can do? Why can't they tell me with 100% certainty where is the storm going to go? I'll just speed to the punchline. Well, obviously, all of you know that there's a whole bunch of variables at play here. There's wind speed, wind direction, air temperature, water temperature, whether the storm is going to interact with land, whether there are other storms in the area that affect the path of the storm, right? There's all kinds of variables that the National Hurricane Center has to deal with. And so that's why they can't ever give us 100%. If they wanted to give us 100%, just think to yourself, if they had to give us 100% certainty, what would that cone look like? Well, it'd essentially be Earth, right, at that point. If you want 100% certainty where this thing is going to go, I'm just going to shade in the whole globe, because that's what it would take. The forecast would be so wide as just to be useless. So here's the deal. I know I'm kind of beating this dead horse, but weather forecasting is uncertain. So therefore, you can't think deterministically because of all those variables, all that uncertainty that I was talking about. You cannot think deterministically. What I mean by you can't think deterministically, I mean there's no such thing as 100%. That just does not exist in weather forecasting. It just doesn't. What it does mean is you do have to start thinking probabilistically, exactly like the National Hurricane Center means. The problem with thinking probabilistically is that humans aren't really good at thinking probabilistically. We're actually terrible at thinking probabilistically. It's one of the reasons why, again, that I started off with a Montel example that we'll get back to in just a second. So kind of explaining what it means to think probabilistically is difficult. And this is the best definition that I've ever come across, I think, for what does it mean to think probabilistically. And that just means to acknowledge that there's more than one possible future outcome. That's what it means to think probabilistically. Like, for example, you've got a coin and you want to flip a coin. Before you flip that coin, you do not know with 100% certainty whether that coin is going to land heads or tails, right? We don't know, but we know we have a 50% chance of heads and a 50% chance of tails. We know that, right? There's more than one possible future outcome. And they use this exact same thinking with hurricane forecasting. Most of you probably know this. They run several models. And each one of the lines on this particular image is a projected path, one of the projected paths of Hurricane Sandy, at that point. And they run all kinds of models, and they run potentially thousands of them to come up to be able to develop that cone that I just showed you. Just out of kind of interest, maybe for all of you in the UK anyway, over the past at least 2 years and maybe 3 years, it's been the UK Met model that's actually been the best of all the models, in the world. The UK Met has actually been the best. So nobody really pays attention to what the Americans forecast. We're all looking at what the Met is saying, what the Met Office is saying. Maybe you've seen something like this too. This is called a spaghetti model plot, a spaghetti plot of models. So you can see all the different, and what's interesting is you can see most of the models are in fairly good agreement in the short term, but then they become wildly dispersed in the long term, and we'll get back to that. All right, so that's thinking probabilistically. So number one, we need to start thinking probabilistically. We've got the shaded area that we've got 67% that the storm is going to land within that area. But more importantly, was this the only forecast that the National Hurricane Center made? I'm actually going to fast forward. I'm going to fast forward 24 hours. This is 24 hours later. Hopefully everybody can see down here. If you go down to this bottom left side, you can see Sandy now has a name. She's now Tropical Storm Sandy. This is now Tuesday, October 23rd, exactly 24 hours later. This is the forecast that the National Hurricane Center puts out, right? Imagine if the National Hurricane Center stopped here. Imagine if they said, okay, here you go. Here's a plan. Here's what we got to work with. Have fun, everybody. Good night. Good luck. See you later. Right? And and everybody went home for the weekend. What would you be thinking right now? So remember I said that Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey were the hardest hit? Remember I just said that before? If you lived in, I can ask these geography questions, by the way, when I talk to a European audience. Imagine that you lived in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or New York. What are you thinking right now? Right? You're probably thinking, look, it's curving off into the Atlantic. Probably going to miss us by a wide margin. I'm probably going to the beach this weekend. I'm probably having a barbecue. I'm probably, doing whatever, right? They're feeling pretty good about life, right? This is what Sandy looked like 1 week later. Exactly 1 week later, this is what Sandy looked like. Note that you can't even see New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania. And so this is something that's crucial to be, to gaining more predictability. Is the National Hurricane Center updates their forecasts constantly as they get new information. So those forecast maps that I just showed you, when storms first appear, they publish them, they update them every 8 hours, and then it's every 5 hours, and then it's every 3 hours and 2 hours. And as it looks like the storm is coming closer and closer and closer, they will update those forecasts much more frequently. And they've got all this new information coming in, about the storm. This is my favorite slide of the whole presentation. This is a time lapse of all the forecasts that the National Hurricane Center put out for Sandy. And you can see how it looks like Sandy is going to go off into the Atlantic and then takes that sharp left turn and just nails New York. Right? This is something, well, I'll get back to this second, but this is this idea of constantly updating your forecast as you get more information. The last thing I want to talk about in this picture is, notice the time scale on there. I don't know if anybody noticed the time scale. It starts with Monday and ends with Thursday. So we're really only talking about 4 days of forecast, which is, when you think about it, not very much. Why are they only giving me 3 or 4 days? Why aren't they giving me 3 or 4 weeks? Why aren't they giving me 3 or 4 months? Why only 3 or 4 days? And again, it's one of those things is, if they had to project what this looked like 3 or 4 weeks from now, that cone would be something like along the lines of Earth. So what we've covered here is just some very, very basic principles of forecasting. Think probabilistically and not deterministically. Update your forecasts to get more information. And of course, shorter term forecasts are better than longer term ones. This doesn't mean that you cannot do long-term forecasting. But it does mean that you can't be upset when your long-term forecasts are wrong or have to change, which they will be wrong and they will have to change. So how do we apply these principles to our work? I get it. It's all about you guys. Enough about hurricanes. You need to know, how do we answer, when will it be done? So what, Dan? Who cares about hurricane? The most important question that our customers will ask us once we start work on something for them is this question called, when will it be done? There's some difficulty, some nuances to the question, when will it be done? Because our customers are going to be looking for a very, very, very specific form of that answer, right? And the form of the answer they're looking for is a date or a number of days. It's not story points, right? They can't say, when will it be done? Oh, 16 story points. That means absolutely nothing to your customer. It has to be a date or a number of days. It's even worse than that. Because when the customers hear a date or a number of days, they are always thinking in terms of elapsed time. Now, here's my favorite example that I love to use about that. Assume it's December 1st. Our customers ask us, when will it be done? We start something for them. They say, hey, when's this thing going to be done? And we tell them 30 days. Right? When do you think your customers think that item is going to be finished? Right? Well, of course, if it's December 1st and we say 30 days, they're thinking December 31st. They're thinking before the end of the year. They're not sitting there thinking, well, you know what? The Christmas holidays are in there and nobody really works over Christmas. And then, of course, once we're through the Christmas holidays, and the New Year's holidays are there, and nobody really works over New Year's. And of course, there are a lot of weekends in there too. So they say 30 days, but they really mean middle to end of January. Your customers are not thinking that way. Your customers are thinking always, always, always in terms of elapsed time. So, and of course, not in terms of story points. So I don't know, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say, if that's the way that our customers think about the world, then that's exactly how we should be thinking about the world. And anytime they ask us this question, when will it be done, we need to be able to answer it in the language of our customers, and they're going to judge us. The way they think about predictability is our ability to accurately answer the question, when will it be done, again, in terms of that elapsed time. All right, so how do we answer this whole when will it be done? Well, remember, this is where those three principles come into play. So we need to go through each principle individually and talk a little bit more about that. So remember, principle number one is think probabilistically and not deterministically. Oh, all right, what do we need to think probabilistically about? Remember that thinking probabilistically means acknowledging that there is more than one possible future outcome. So when our customers ask us, when will it be done, there is no certainty. There is no certainty whatsoever. But let's see how we fall into the certainty trap. Okay, so as a real world example, let's say that we started a project and we've completed 12 stories in 1 week. Okay, let's further say we have 120 stories left in the backlog. Let's say we've scoped out the whole project and we know for sure, with 100% certainty, which of course we know doesn't exist, but let's just say in this magical fantasy land that we know for sure that we have 120 stories left to complete in the backlog. When will our project be finished? If we were, what's the classic way, like if we talk about classic project management, what would classic project management say about when this project would be done? Does anybody, maybe in the chat, what would you say? Yeah, as soon as possible. 120 divided by 12 equals 10. Oh, damn, it's Jimmy Doon the Pub said that. I don't want to, right? Best first time. Right? 4 weeks because we've, yeah. So, I mean, yes, obviously the maths, I have to remember maths is plural over there. I said the math so that it's pretty easy for you. Yeah, traditionally we would say 10 weeks. There are several problems with the 10-week answer. The first of which is that that 10-week answer is actually calculating, whether we know it or not, it's actually calculating an average. And there are at least two problems with using an average to answer the question, when will it be done? The first is, and I think I saw this on the chat, but is this the second piece of homework I've given you? I forgot. I can't remember if I've given you homework. I think I did give you a little bit of homework already. You guys didn't know you were going to come to this talk and actually have to walk away with things that you have to do, but you're going to. So this is your next bit of homework, is to read the book, The Flaw of Averages by Dr. Sam Savage. The good news is you really only have to read the first half of the book. Second half of the book really doesn't add anything. First half of the book of The Flaw of Averages. But I'll give you the basic premise right now. And the basic idea behind The Flaw of Averages, this book in particular, is that plans based on average fail on average. So that 10 weeks that we just communicated was an average. That's a plan based on average. And if we base a plan on an average, that means that we have an average chance of failing. We technically also have an average chance of succeeding too, but we have an average chance of failing, which kind of brings us to the second point, is that the average itself communicates almost no information about risk. I'll get to this picture here in a second. And what I mean by that is when your customers ask, when will it be done? In that example I just said, when they ask, when will it be done? And we say 10 weeks, what do you think our customers are thinking, right? They're thinking, wow, 10 weeks, it's going to be exactly 10 weeks. With 100% certainty, it is going to be exactly 10 weeks. We've given them absolutely no information about risk. Remember this picture? I said, here's this cone, this big kind of range of possibilities, and there's a 60 to 70% chance that the storm center is going to go within this in this range, right? That's how the National Hurricane Center communicates forecasts. So that's exactly how we should be communicating our forecast. Or for any forecast that you give, should always contain at least two parts: a range of possible outcomes and a probability associated with that range. If you say 10 weeks, your customers are translating that to exactly 10 weeks with 100% certainty. The answer should be kind of more in the form of, well, 10 weeks or less with a 50% chance, right? That's probably the real answer from before. Which of course brings us back to the question that I asked right to start this thing, to tie this all together. What does a 19th century Yorkshire cotton industrialist have to do with the Manhattan Project? The answer to this question is going to be how we communicate forecasts to our customers, or how we come up with that forecast. Did anybody happen to Google this and find out what the answer is? Anyone who didn't cheat, who hasn't seen this before? Anybody want to chat and answer? Any guesses? Time travel? No. Nobody really went and Googled this and looked it up, really? So disappointed. Thought you guys would have got this. All right, I'll give it to you. I'm feeling nice. The answer, of course, is Monte Carlo. Yes, Monte Carlo. What does so somebody look that up. But the answer to that question is Monte Carlo. And able to produce these forecasts that we need to give to our customers, one method that we might choose to use is something called a Monte Carlo simulation. So this is where we need to go back to our Monty Hall example. So Chris, you're still with me? It was Chris, right?
Hi. Hello.
Yeah, good. All right, I'm going to reshare my screen here. So when last we left off, hopefully this is time for everybody to wake up now. When last we left off, Chris had chosen door number 1. I revealed door number 2 where there was a goat. And I said, okay, Chris, you get a chance to change again. And he said, no, Dan, I want to stick with door number 1. Well, here's the deal, Chris, I lied. I'm going to give you one more chance. Based on everything that you've seen in this presentation up to now, what do you think? Has your plan changed at all? Do you want to stick with door number 1, or I'm going to give you one more chance to change if you want to. You're more than welcome to stay with door number 1, but if you want to change to 3, you can go to 3. What do you want to do?
No, I'll stick with number 1.
You're going to stick with door number 1. Okay, I like it, Chris. All right. Well, so before I reveal the answer, let's think about this as a group for a second. What might be one way that we could figure this out? Let me give you an example. Let's say I've got a coin and I want to flip it, and I want to know what's my probability of it coming up heads. Right? What are the chances of it? And you guys can feel free to chat this too. What are the chances that I flip a coin and it comes up heads? What are the chances? Anybody want to put a response? This is supposed to be easy. Yeah, 50-50. It's a 50% chance. Yeah. And the reason we know that is because, like I said, there's two possible outcomes. Heads is one of those possible outcomes. 1 divided by 2 is 50%. Easy, right? Let's say I was let's say I'm American and I'm really bad at maths, right? And I can't do 1 divided by 2. What might be one way that I could figure out what really are my chances of flipping a coin and it coming up heads. Can anybody think what might be one way? I literally do not know how to do 1 divided by 2. So yeah, flip it. Yeah, that's right. Flip it. Just start trying it. Do it, flip it over and over and over and over and over again, and track how many times it comes up heads and how many times it comes up tails. Now, turns out you still need math to do that, and it turns out that math is probably harder than just 1 divided by 2. But that's exactly how you would find out what our probability is. Just flip it over and over and over again. That is what we just explained there. That's a very, very, very simple Monte Carlo simulation. That's exactly what Monte Carlo simulation is. So simulate an experiment over and over and over again, track the results, and you can figure out probabilities based on those results. That's exactly what this website does. So I'm going to show you. So Chris said he's going to stick with door number 1. I'm going to choose door number 1, and Chris is believe it or not, Chris is a winner. But it's not all good news. Because you can see down here, everybody can see down at the bottom of the page, we've got switched versus didn't switch. And this website is actually tracking. Everybody who comes here is tracking. You know, what's the right strategy, whether to switch or didn't switch. And you can see by about a 2-to-1 margin, it's a much, much, much better strategy to actually switch. When you're given the opportunity to switch, it's a much, much better strategy. But remember, this is probabilistic here. That doesn't mean that every time you switch, you're going to win. And it doesn't mean that every time you don't switch, you're not going to win. It's just that, you know, if we were to play this over and over and over again, your chances of winning are much, much higher if you switch than if you don't switch. Now, this is probably freaking people out. And I'm happy, if we have time at the end, I'm happy to explain why this works out the way that it is. But remember I said that humans are terrible at probabilistic thinking? This is why we need things like Monte Carlo simulation. Whether you understand the maths behind this or not, it doesn't matter, because these numbers don't lie, right? This is tracking it over and over and over again. And what this is telling us is that by a 2-to-1 margin, we have a much better chance of switching than not switching. Not to get too political, but you know, going into the 2016 election, you know, Trump only had a 25% chance of winning. Again, that doesn't mean that Trump loses every time. He wins every 4th election. Just happened, turns out, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to say it. 2016 was one of those 4 times. That's just the way the probability works. But what we really care about is understanding what that risk is, so that we can make the right choices, or the best. I shouldn't say the best choices. Maybe this is a good point to pause, just before we get too much further. This is a good point to pause to maybe take a question or two.
I'll look down, let me see if there's anything.
Does anybody have something they want to
amongst our audience?
want to shout out?
Looking for any questions. I don't think I saw any. I maybe spotted one. What's the chat about flipping coins? And it's because you keep asking questions. I did see one. I don't.
All right. Well, if there are no questions, I mean, like I said,
I'm going to ask Craig's one where he wants you to become a meteorologist.
Yeah, I don't know if Craig is if that was a serious question. Are the hurricane cones getting smaller? Believe it or not, actually they are. It was not last year. I think it was the year before. They actually narrowed the size of the cones. So if you go look at National Hurricane Center forecasts now, you'll see those cones are a little bit narrower. They are getting better over time at being able to predict this stuff. Yeah.
I got one.
You got one?
Yeah, I got one. Assuming starting from absolute scratch, what is the minimum data set needed to get a reasonable estimate using Dan's techniques?
Yeah, this is one of the most popular questions I get. It kind of fascinates me, and I think maybe it's because of the way that we've been trained in school or in university. I think a lot of people believe in the law of large numbers and believe that you need to have lots and lots and lots and lots of data to be able to make a good forecast. Believe it or not, actually the opposite is true. But there's a couple things I want to say about this. So the question is, how much data do we need? If we don't have any data, how much data do we need? Well, the first thing is, it is very, 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 very rare that I go into a team, a company, an organization, whatever, and they don't have any data. Usually the opposite is true. Usually there's way too much data, and your job is more to decide what's the relevant data, what's the signal versus what is the noise. That's usually the harder problem. But let's say that this is really a completely brand new team, totally greenfield project. We literally don't have any data. Like I said, that's rare, but it could happen. So to answer the question directly, how much data do we need to do this Monte Carlo forecast, assuming certain things that we can't get into right now, you need as little as 10 to 11 data points to be able to do that Monte Carlo simulation. You can be fairly certain with 10 to 11. At about 20, you're very, very certain. At some point, you get to the point where you probably have too much data. And what you really care about is your most recent data. Rather than trying to get as much data as possible, what you really care about is getting your most recent data. With some caveats with that too. Like, for example, if you're in January, you would not necessarily use December's data to forecast a January complete date. But these are all subtleties that maybe we can get to at the end of the talk. Maybe not.
Got another good one if you fancy another question.
Why not?
Inderjeet's asking, do the public accept this probabilistic approach, e.g. sort of current health crisis? Topic. How is it possible to use this math and communicate info without being accused of getting it wrong from the outset? I like that.
So do the public accept this? I would say no, and COVID is a prime example. I've thought about updating this talk for COVID, but I think people are a bit COVID weary right now. Nobody really wants to talk about this.
That's probably a bit of a sensitive subject right now.
Yeah. But it's a great question, because no, the public's terrible. It's fascinating that the public will accept probabilistic forecasting when it comes to weather, but when it comes to things like this COVID crisis, they won't. And this is the problem with humans, right? We want certainty. We want to be able to know exactly what's going on. We don't want to accept that, hey, things could change, and when they change, we need to update forecasts, and we need to adjust our plans based on this updated information. So yeah, trust me, if I had a good answer to that, no offense, of course, I love you all, but if I had a good answer to that, I would not be talking to you fine folk. I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere counting my money. If I could figure out a way to get the public to understand this stuff and to learn it and to love it. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you. But I will tell you this, in our world, most of our customers get it. And I would say most executives I talk to really, especially if you couch it from a perspective of risk management, most people understand risk. Most people understand in terms of managing risk, especially if they're poker players, or especially if they're a publicly traded company, right? They understand risk, especially finance people. So if you can couch it in terms of risk management, you're much better. Maybe one more before we go, or because I saw a lot come in.
Here's a good one. So it gives you opportunity to maybe expand a little bit on your example. But so Brendan's asking about your sort of probability example, and he can't get his head around it. So he's basically asking the fact that the persons make the choices is kind of irrelevant. It's the first time, sort of third 33% each door, second round 50% each door, whether the choice changes or not. Can you explain?
Oh, yeah. Can we hold that one off? So that's asking specifically about the Monty Hall example, right? That's if we have time, I'll come back to that and I'll explain it. Yeah, it's fairly confusing. I get it, and that's why I'm saying, throw the maths out the window. Just forget about the maths. Like I said, the whole point is the way that whether you understand the maths, whether you get it, whether you believe it. I mean, you just run the numbers. Just run it over and over and over again and track it. And that's what it is. And to me, that's the beauty of the Monte Carlo simulation, is we don't have to understand underneath. We don't have to understand the intricacies of the problem. Just run the simulations, and the simulations will tell you. But if we have a chance, I don't want to say I promise, but if we have a chance, I'll try and get back to that. So I just have a few more things that I want to, because we're only on principle number 1. So I just want to wrap this up, and then hopefully we can take a lot more questions, at the end. Oops. I saw, by the way, I saw a comment about Jay Bloom. Don't listen to anything that Jabe says, and you can tell him I said that. Actually tweet him and said, Dan says, don't listen to anything that Jay Bloom says. Please do that. Okay, so I was going to, so we're going to do, what we're going to do is, well, how do we do Monte Carlo simulation for our project? Well, one thing that we can do is we can, I'll go through this very, very quickly. We can set some boundaries in terms of our project. And we as a team need to decide at what point do we consider work started, at what point do we consider work finished. And we're going to track, the data that we're going to track is whenever something crosses that start line, we're going to take a timestamp, and anything crosses that finish line, we're going to take a timestamp. And from that data, we're going to be able to calculate a flow metric called throughput. And all throughput is a measure of how many items cross that endpoint per unit of time. So I'm finishing 2 stories per day, 5 stories per week, 30 stories per month. Those are all measures of throughput. I can take that throughput and I can throw it into a Monte Carlo simulation. And using using the historical throughput and using Monte Carlo simulation, I can now project out what are my chances of certain outcomes happening. And again, if we have time, I'll show you exactly how that works. But that's really what you're going to be doing, is you're going to be running a throughput Monte Carlo simulation. There's a lot of information out there about how to do this. There's a book that I'm going to recommend at the end by the world's best author on this stuff that explains very much how to do this. We'll get to that in just a second. So principle number 2, update your forecasts when you get more information. That's this. And this is, I think, what some people were talking about. How do we update our forecast without saying that we were wrong? Well, you know, this is just life, right? Things happen, things change. We need to deal with it, right? We need to be adults, we need to be professionals, and we need to understand that that things are going to change. And this is something that I like. This is a hashtag that I'm trying to get trending on Twitter. It's not happening. Maybe you guys can help me out here. But this is a concept I call continuous forecasting. You know, it's not that, like I said before, it's not that we plan up front and then that's the plan. We don't change the plan because the plan is the plan. We got to work the plan and it's the plan, right? That's not the way forecasting works. When you get new information, you'd be silly. You'd be silly to not at least consider, how does this new information affect the forecast that I've already put out there? And if it does affect it, rerun the forecast. This is one of the reasons why Monte Carlo simulation is so powerful, is because you can run thousands of simulations in seconds. You know, you don't have to take the whole team offline to do stupid planning, poker planning, or whatever the heck it's called. And then everybody's pissed off and it ends up being wrong anyway. No, you can do sprint planning in literally under a minute. A great example, and I love talking to European audiences because I can use this example. A great example is football, of course, proper football, right? Not American football, but proper football. This is an example from the last World Cup. This is the round of 16, Belgium and Japan. And you know, there's a whole bunch of websites out there that will track live in-game probabilities of certain teams winning. And you can see at the beginning of the game, so this red shaded area is Belgium's chance of winning, and this blue shaded area is Japan's chance of winning. And you can see at the beginning, at kickoff, Belgium had they were an overwhelming favorite to win this game. But just after the half, Japan's probability jumped up, and then it jumped up again, right? Everybody remember what happened then? You guys, hopefully everybody remembers this game. Well, it was a great game up until about the 70th minute. Japan scored 2 quick goals right after the half, right? And you can see that because they scored those 2 goals, that meant that fundamentally the probability of the game changed because they scored goals. And you can see that's reflected here. But then after about, what was it, I don't know, 65th or 70th minute, Belgium scores a goal, and then they score another goal, and then right before full time, they score yet another one. And you can see how this is a great example of continuous forecasting. This is what I'm talking about. Continuous forecasting in practice. This is from a company that I work with. Excuse me. And you can see they have a whole bunch of teams here, and each team has at least one, potentially multiple release dates. And they have dates that they're working toward, and they have, you know, number of stories left in the release. And you can see they're taking these principles, and in the background they are running a Monte Carlo simulation. And you can see for each team in each release, what are their chances? What is the team's chances of hitting that release? And they use a red, yellow, green, fairly classic red, yellow, green dashboard to show this. And the thing is, when a team goes from green to yellow, or more importantly, probably from yellow to red, and probably even more importantly, from green to red, the conversation isn't, wow, this team sucks. Look, hiring integration, they only have a 37.42% chance of winning. This team, hiring integration just really, really sucks. That's not the conversation. The conversation is, okay, what has changed since the last forecast? That means, you know, that now we only have a 37% chance of finishing, as opposed to a 98% chance of finishing. And now this is where all classic project management stuff comes in. You know, can we cut scope? Hopefully. Can we change the date? Can we, God forbid, add more people to the team? Can we, even more, God forbid, work weekends, start working nights, weekends? Even more, God forbid, add people to the team and start working nights and weekends. But all of those are options, right, that we need to play around with, and we can model those things with a Monte Carlo simulation and find out. Last thing, principle, because I've really gone over what I really wanted to talk. Principle number 3, shorter term forecasts are better than longer term ones. You know, again, this means that you can't, this doesn't mean that you can't do long-term forecasts. There are some quote unquote agile frameworks out there that you know, propose, what is it, 10-week forecasting or whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to name any names or whatever. So it doesn't mean that you can't do of course you can do long-term forecasts. But obviously the longer time horizon that you do, the less chance you have of that, number one, that forecast being true, and number two, that forecast is going to need to change because of more information. I would argue the whole reason that Scrum exists is to solve that problem. Remember, our planning horizons in waterfall world were, you know, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. And Scrum came along and said, it's silly to be planning out 18 to 24 months. You can't do that. The best that we could possibly hope to do in a complex world is plan for the next 30 days or less. And so a lot of times it's a lot less than 30 days. And that's exactly what they were trying to do. I'm not going to go through this case study because we don't have time for that. And it's quite frankly kind of boring. All right, sum up. If you track nothing else, track the date that item starts and the date that an item completes. From that, we can calculate throughput, start and end data. Again, if anybody wants to stick around, I can show example of all this. But we can calculate throughput from start and end data. Using that historical throughput, we can run a Monte Carlo simulation that will give us a range of possible outcomes so that we can communicate our forecast in terms of a range that we're interested in and a probability associated with that range. As always, like I said, please update your forecast when you get more information. It's never, you don't set it and forget it, right? You don't just ever do one forecast and that's your forecast. You're doing multiple forecasts, continuous forecasting, right? And then of course, favor shorter term forecasts over longer term ones. Please don't forget the hashtag continuous forecasting. I expect that to see you at that in all of your tweets about how excellent this session was, by the way, hint, hint. And then of course, it doesn't matter how good your forecasts are or how good your forecasting techniques are, if you're not taking action on the information that you're getting, right? If we're not evacuating Florida because it looks like the hurricane is going to slam into Florida, then you kind of get what you deserve when that happens. A couple of books, like I said, by the world's best author on this topic, probably the world's best books by the world's best author. A book called When Will It Be Done? That goes into this is the book that goes into the details, the mechanics of Monte Carlo forecasting and why it works and how to use it. Actionable Agile Metrics for Predictability is more about understanding the basic metrics of flow and why they are so important and how we can leverage them for better predictability. That dashboard that I showed you, the Monte Carlo dashboard, the red, yellow, green dashboard that I showed you, if anybody wants to read about that, just Google Ultimate Kanban. There's a case study at InfoQ. So if you Google Ultimate Kanban InfoQ, you'll get it, you'll find it. So please feel free to read about that. All right, Seth, how are we doing on questions?
There's a few coming through. Yeah, let me just dig them out. I saw a good one here about using predictive analytics to, technical debt. Have you looked at applying sort of predictive analytics to help manage technical debt?
To help manage, let me say this. I'm going to try to explain this. Because I'm Italian, I'm going to wave my hands a lot. So hopefully everybody can see this. And so it may make sense and it may not. But to me, one of the beauties of using throughput as a metric for our Monte Carlo forecasting is that throughput is being collected under certain conditions, if this makes any sense. So those certain conditions are, if you're operating in an environment with high technical debt, that's going to affect your throughput. If you're operating in an environment with a lot of dependencies, that's going to affect your throughput. If you're operating in an environment with high WIP, that's going to affect your throughput. If you're operating in an environment with all these things, that's going to affect your throughput. So your throughput will be a function of all this stuff. So if you have high technical debt, then your throughput will suffer. If you have high WIP, your throughput will suffer. And remember, if we're using that historical throughput, the kind of the dirty little secret of Monte Carlo simulation is we are assuming that the future that we're predicting roughly looks like the past that we have data for. So if we collect a whole bunch of throughput data under conditions of high technical debt, then the forecast that we're going to make is going to assume that we're going to continue to have high technical debt. If we start cleaning up that technical debt, that throughput will start to go up. And remember, continuous forecasting to the rescue. Remember, continuous forecasting to the rescue, because once that throughput starts going up, once we clean up technical debt and the throughput starts going up, remember, we're taking that new information, we're taking that new throughput data and we're feeding it into our simulation. And so that's going to constantly, continuously update and show whether cleaning up technical debt is helping or hurting us. Did you see me waving my hands? I was kind of out of frame. I don't know if you guys saw I was waving. Does that help? I hope. I don't know.
So
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that it did help.
I
So I'm going to pat myself on the shoulder for that answer.
There's one here about some of this material similar to Tetlock super forecasting. You familiar with that, Dan?
Yeah, oh yeah, and I saw it breaks down into fat tails. Here's what I would say about that. Yeah, we definitely need whiskey for this one, because this is really honestly branching over into more philosophical. Yes, whenever you get that thing out there, that extreme out there in the in the fat tail, some of this stuff will break down. Whenever you get like that black swan event, this stuff will break down. There's no doubt about it. But the idea here is, are we making the best economic decisions based on the information that we have? And remember that 99.9+% of the data that we have should not be in that fat tail, right? It should be, it should be, what I'm talking about is separating out, noise from signal here. We need to do everything that we can do to control the things that we can control, because those kind of black swan events are not necessarily things that we can control. So we need to do things that we can control. And I do, in the books, I talk a lot about what we need to do to control those things. If we're controlling those things, then we will probably make, again, over the long run, economically viable decisions. Will that insulate us from all of these other things, from all these extreme things like COVID-19 happened? Who on January 1st would have ever predicted that COVID-19 would have shut down the whole economy, right? Will we ever? We will always be susceptible to those things. So my philosophy is, let's control the things that we can control, and let's, as much as possible, mitigate those things that we can't. I think that's the best strategy for the long term. I know that's not a good answer, but that's what I'm going to say, and I'm going to stick to it.
Cool. That's what I know what Darren's asking, and I'll give you the opportunity to let our attendees benefit from your knowledge in this one.
Oh, I saw.
The first intervention on teams struggling with Kanban to increase predictability would be to limit WIP. No.
Believe it or not, I know it sounds strange. Kanban guy saying my first intervention rarely is my first. Certainly controlling WIP is important, but my first intervention, my much more favorite first intervention for teams struggling with predictability is actually to pay attention to something called aging. I by far and away, the most important metric out there is aging, is WIP age. So remember I said we're drawing boundaries around our process. We want to know when something starts and when something finishes. And by monitoring the age of items between those two points, that's going to drive so much better, more timely, better quality conversations than some arbitrary number on a board. Don't get me wrong, controlling WIP is going to be important. It's going to potentially even be necessary at some point. but you can kind of back into that controlling WIP by just looking at aging. So my first intervention is always, I shouldn't say always, mostly look at WIP age, look at WIP age, look at WIP age. That's the best thing that we've got by far. There was something in split rate. I just want to say something very quickly. I don't know if anybody's heard about how do we factor split rate into Monte Carlo forecasts. This is one of those things that you guys probably can't see. I don't really have any hair, but it's stuff that kind of makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This idea of split rate forecasting, I can't tell you how much this drives me nuts, because there's so many things wrong with split rate. The most important thing is, you know, people want to say, well, we've got this backlog of 100 items and our split rate is 2 or whatever. So, you know, we think this backlog of 100 items is really 200 items. And so we're going to do the forecast based on the 200 items, not the 100 items. The reason that's faulty thinking is because the whole idea of splitting stories or splitting items is to figure out the stuff you don't want to do, right? So just because your items normally split from one thing into 2 items, that doesn't mean that your backlog is now 200 items. What that really means is you've got much more opportunities now to figure out the stuff that you don't want to work on. So I think split rate is one of the worst. Can you tell I'm kind of passionate about this? I think it's one of the worst things that you can incorporate into a forecast. It's just from my perspective, in my humble opinion, terrible idea. Think about splitting stories. The reason you split stories is to figure out what you don't want to do, not what you have to do. Right? Aren't the outliers the important ones? I just saw that. By the way, yeah. So the outliers, generally speaking, no. Generally speaking, no. The outliers aren't. And this is, I didn't have a chance. And maybe, I don't know. Shameless plug, Sath. Maybe I have to come back and talk about some of this. Maybe I get invited back.
You're always welcome back.
But one of the we take what's called a percentile approach, and by taking one of the best reasons why you take a percentile approach is because percentiles are very robust to outliers, very robust to outliers. So everybody's heard the joke, you know, Bill Gates walks into a pub. On average, everybody in the pub is a billionaire, right? Well, but if you went up and talked to any person, you know, any person in the pub is not a billionaire. So Bill Gates is an outlier, and so people say, well, that's important. Generally speaking, outliers are not. But we can talk about that.
I like that folk are asking you questions just to get you ranting.
Most people probably, I know Jimmy doing the pub knows, he knows all the buttons to push. I'm surprised nobody's asked about class of service or something like that.
I think you've kind of, yeah, you've got most of them. We've still got about 5 minutes. Any other ones, folks?
I mean, and we, like I said, we can say something.
Let's make the most of his time. Don't be shy. Keep the questions coming. Here we go. Andy's got another one. How would you utilize this with? Okay. How would you utilize this with a small backlog where work is broken down in detail just in time? Okay.
So for that particular question, how would you utilize this as a small backlog? The very first question I always ask is, you know, do you need to? Would you need to? For the most part, I've been talking about forecasts for multiple items. And when I say forecast for multiple items, what I mean is things like, well, we've got 100 items in our backlog. How long is it going to take to get those 100 things done? Or we've got a release date coming up on November 1st. How long is it going to, or how many items can I get done by November 1st? Those are forecasts for multiple items. What we haven't talked about is forecasts for single items, right? I've started this single item just in time. How long is it going to take me to get this single item done? That's going to require a different technique. That's Monte Carlo and throughput is not your choice in that world. So if you live in a world, which sounds brilliant to me, by the way, where we have a small backlog and work is broken down just in time, I'm not sure that this is the approach that you'd want to use. You're probably going to want to use something else and start looking at things like aging and cycle time to make more proactive decisions. That's obviously without knowing your context and without knowing what's going on. But that's the world that I want to be, is where we don't have a lot of stuff sitting in our backlog and we are just breaking work down just in time. I do think Ben Clayton's question is an important one.
I'm just shifting back to, there we go. It's Monte Carlo related.
Okay.
Forget that you can use a Monte Carlo to predict when will I be done. when I have a known number of stories, but how do you deal with it when will you be done question, when you're continually discovering and scoping stories? Yeah, that is a good question.
I mean, if I can I just take, I mean, obviously people need to drop off, you need to drop off. I'll just take two minutes to answer that one. I hope I can bring this up very quickly. Of course, I should have been ready with this. But
you got 5 minutes or so.
My internet seems to be really slow here and not wanting to cooperate. Here we go. If I go to Monte Carlo. Okay. Let me stop this share and share this other screen. Okay, the way that I would say that, so hopefully you can see my screen, and I can't get into the mechanics of what's going on here, but this is a Monte Carlo. We're trying to answer when will it be done, a Monte Carlo simulation where we're trying to answer when will it be done with a known number of stories. So this is like how long will it take when we know that there are exactly 100 items. The way that you get around that, because I agree, rarely, if ever, does it happen when we know exactly there's 100 items. So the way that you do this is you essentially run a Monte Carlo of Monte Carlos, if you will, and say, okay, we don't know it's 100. We actually think it's somewhere between 100 to 150. We think the range of stories that we're going to have in our backlog is somewhere between 100 and 150. And that's how I would answer that question. Because you're right, we rarely know exactly how many stories. So let's put in a range that we think it's going to be, and run the Monte Carlo simulation that way. And hopefully everybody saw when I did that, you saw that the model updated immediately. And so what it's saying is the way that you read this is saying we have an 85% chance of being done on or before October 1st. If we change it to somewhere between 100 and 150, now it's saying our 85% chance is somewhere before on or before October 12th. So that's it. So yes, very, 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 very important question. I'm glad you asked it. You almost never know exactly how many stories. What you really know is a range. So.
Great, thanks, Dan. Another one, a Monte Carlo simulation.
Okay, one more.
What's the difference between that and the cycle time histogram?
I think is that somebody taking the piss? Is that somebody being serious? Is that from?
It's hard.
It's genuine question. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. All right. No. That's one of my hot buttons too.
Sorry about that.
No. I never know who's asking these questions, and I've got these hecklers on the call, so my apologies. I didn't. What's the difference? So the big difference, if I can answer this in 25 words or less, the big difference is cycle time. The flow metric of cycle time, I would argue, is much better suited to answer the question, when will it be done for a single item? So we want to know, hey, we just started this single story or this single epic. When will this single item be done? That's cycle time. That's when you want to look at cycle time. And for the most part, you won't look at a cycle to answer that question. You won't look at a cycle time histogram. You'll look at what's called a cycle time scatter plot. Scatter plot is a much more powerful way to look at time series data than a histogram. So much better. I wish we had time to get into that, but we don't. The Monte Carlo is for when we're talking about multiple items, through using throughput and multiple items. So like I said, I want to know, I've got between 100 and 150 stories to be done. How long is it going to take to get those multiple items done? That's when we want to start looking at throughput in Monte Carlo simulation. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yep. Right. I think, we've got probably about 5, then we'll wrap it up. I get the feeling that folks are still quite interested in your original game. So I think the doors, and really why is it better to switch to get the car? So I think your opportunity to just elaborate on that a little bit.
Okay. I
mean, it would probably be a nice way to finish, I would have thought.
All right. Okay. I'm going to explain it, and all of you will be upset, and you're not going to understand, and that's okay, because this took me forever too. And it's much easier to do this on a whiteboard, but I'll try to do it here. Okay. When all 3 doors are closed, we know, as Chris said, we know we have a 33% chance of getting any one right. Okay, 33% chance. So when Chris chose door number 1, we know that he had a 33% chance of being right. We also know, this is the tricky part, we also know he had a 66% chance of being wrong. And that 66% chance was whether if the car comes up as door 2 or door 3, right? So it's either door number 1 or it's door 2 or door 3. If it's door number 1, it's 33%. If it's door 2 or door 3, it's 66%. Does that make sense? So it's either door number 1 or it's not door number 1, essentially. When I clicked on door number 1 and I revealed door number 2, I did him a huge favor, because remember I just said you have a 66% chance of it being door 2 or door 3. Well, I just revealed that door 2 is not, it's not it. So that means I have a 66% chance that it's door 3. Remember, because it could be door 2 or door 3. I know it's not door 2, so therefore it has to be door 3. So I have a 33% chance of it being door number 1, a 66% chance of it being door number 3. Doesn't help, does it? I mean, that's the way. Another way that a lot of people like to explain it is, imagine there are 1,000 doors. Imagine there are 1,000 doors, and Monty Hall revealed 998 of them. Right? Would you change then? Because really, what are your chances then of being right? So that's another way of thinking about it. I personally don't like that one, but there are all kinds of papers and articles and everything written up about this. Like I said, it took me forever to kind of get this through my head, what was going on. But it's the reason that I like this example is because whether you understand the math or not, we can always say, well, we'll choose door number 1 and we'll stick with door number 1. And you see, this time we lost. But we know this is running a Monte Carlo simulation. If I switch, I'm much better off.
If you've got those papers, feel free to share them, and I'm happy to share them around the community. I'm sure some of our attendees would be.
So I'm from Aberdeen. Does it
to do more of a deep dive? Sorry, I heard a voice.
I'm from Aberdeen. Does it work with sheep?
Yeah.
Hey, I think we're good, Dan. I'm going to let you off the hook there. Wanted to give you the chance to just elaborate on the deal game, but I think those papers would be cool. I think people would enjoy digesting them. Excellent.
Sure, if I can. So if I could just say thanks for everybody who stuck around. I mean, I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sure some people had to leave, but thank you everybody who stuck around. Thanks for the great questions. I wish we had more than an hour to talk about some of this stuff. I mean, these are things I pack into a 2-day class. So I would love the opportunity to come back and talk some more to you. But I mean, until then, I really, really enjoyed my time here, as I always do whenever I talk to people like you guys. So thanks so much for
really
letting me be here.
appreciate you joining us. It's delightful to have you on, and glad I managed to finally get you into the schedule. So always good to see you. Always good to hear your take on things, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed it just as much as I did. So thanks for your time. We do appreciate it, and we'll definitely hope to have you back at some point. And you never know, maybe at some point, maybe even a face-to-face thing in Scotland, and we'll get you that whiskey for sure.
Hopefully it's in person sooner rather than later. I'd love to meet all of you in person. So.
And thanks awesome people. Shall we give one cheers to Dan? It's a fantastic, right? It should be a cheers to Dan. Cheers, yeah.
Cheers,
thank you. Thanks.
Oh, Danny, champion of the world.
Yeah.
Champion in the world. Yeah. Thank you.
Everybody be safe, be well. Have a great evening, have a great week, and see you all very soon.
Wear a mask. Wear a mask.
Right, fabulous to hear from Dan. Always good to see him. Just the usual, just quick wrap-ups for everyone. Thank you all for your participation this evening, by the way. It was awesome. And I think Dan thoroughly enjoyed it too. Next week, closing out August. I can't believe I'm saying that. August is nearly coming to an end. Crikey, the year has flown. We're closing out with Simon Brown. We'll be talking about the themes in his new book, Curious Advantage. He's joining us with his fellow co-authors from Switzerland, and then we're moving into our fortnightly series from September. So we've got a couple of those in the diary. You might have saw those in Meetup. So yeah, you feel free to sign up for those if those are of interest to you. Just a couple of other quick things to close. I sent out a comms last night with some other sort of community bits and pieces, but I did also mention this plan to do this amazing sort of global retro that a few of our friends are kind of talking about and trying to organise. Scott is on the call, and he's one of the driving forces behind it. I think it's an amazing thing to kind of be doing. I heard Craig and Scott talking about it at a lunchtime session today. So if you are interested in contributing to that, or learning more, or even inputting your own thoughts about your own reflections on the last 20 years of Agile, then do please do that. I'm sure the guys would be delighted to hear from you to help shape their vision for the events for next year. And yeah, I think it's great. So yeah, do please contribute to that if you feel you want to. I think it would be key to hear from people. Anything you want to quickly say, Scott? Or no, you good?
Good.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thanks, mate. Yeah, as I say, that's the shout out. Thanks again for joining. If you do have feedback for the team and I, you're always welcome to get in touch. You can reach us via email, all the usual social channels, and yeah, we hope to see you again soon. We'll have the recording out as early as we can tomorrow for anyone who missed bits of it, etc. So yeah, thanks again for joining. Stay safe, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks, folks. All the best.
Cheers.
Okay.
See
Thanks
you,
again, Dan.
everybody. Cheers. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thank you.